Today I'm going to share exactly how much money I lost on this property and why it took me over a year to get the keys back. And I'm also going to share some disgusting truths about what some tenants can do and will do to your property unprovoked. So on social media, influencers will only show you how much money they're making and how bloody great they are and how easy property investing is. And although I don't often fall for that nonsense myself, I do know that many people watching often do. Terms like passive income, £10,000 a month, guaranteed rents are keywords that most of them use, when the truth is most haven't even probably looked after a tenant for more than 12 months. However, today I'm going to share one of the worst experiences I've ever had in property on actually one of my best investments back in the day. So let's run through a quick backstory. So I bought this property many years ago when I first decided to quit my job and go full-time into property. Not something I advise for everyone, by the way. So essentially there was around £100,000 on the line. And I knew failing this, it would send me back to my 9 to 5. So it was definitely a nerve-wracking 6 months. However, despite nearly crapping myself many times on the project, it turned out okay. But after my first tenant left, who were a beautiful young couple who actually moved on to their own home, I made one of the biggest mistakes of my life. And to avoid being sued, I'm going to keep the individual's name out of this, although I do hope nobody watching this ends up with her as a tenant, because as far as I'm concerned, she's a demon. But I also have to hold my hands up too, because I made a ton of rookie mistakes trying to be a nice guy. And if there's one tip I would give anyone watching this who owns a property and rents it out, is to not be a nice landlord. And before you get at me in the comments, I don't mean rent out shitty houses and do your tenants dirty. Please don't do that. I mean don't be overly nice and try and be their friend. Instead, just be a good landlord and a fair one, and stick to that. You don't need to be overly nice to tenants, even though it has always been my approach over the last 11 years, but take it from me, some people will sadly abuse that. So it's just better to keep things professional. And that starts from when you first meet a tenant. Remember, they're putting their best foot forward, so don't believe every single thing they say. But I guess in hindsight, I just felt sorry for this individual and I actually wanted to give her a chance. She was a single mom, she worked in the care sector, and I had just come off my social work stint trying to save kids from broken homes. And I don't know, I just kind of felt a connection there. Don't feel connections, stick to facts, and reference check, my friends. A second tip just on the back of that is listen to the person you are vetting them with. So one of the tips I always use is when I have open house viewings for tenants is I always take another person with me to get a second opinion. Now my wife went with me at the time and I ignored her gut feeling as she wanted another tenant in there because she was feeling bad vibes from this one. But me being a numpty, I had already fallen for the sob story. Maybe it was the fact that she was a single mother. Maybe it was the fact that she worked in the care system and I assumed that she had a heartbeat. But obviously I was wrong in hindsight. So make sure you sit there and you're a bit more logical in your approach. And when it comes to checks, make sure you're checking their salary, their job security, past reference checks, and even try and speak to previous landlords. Because if you don't do that, you're gonna end up doing videos like me many years down the line. Because I genuinely felt they were just having a bad time in life. And let's be honest guys, we're all one mistake or one moment away from having a bad time. However, I wasn't realizing that this was actually the norm for them, which I ended up finding out much later down the road. Now, before I jump into some of the costs of what this nightmare tenant cost me on this property, I just want someone watching this to explain why somebody would do what they did, given I tried my best as a landlord to look after them. Because in the time she stayed with us, I let her pay rent probably 90% of the time late. I never increased the rents despite them going for £300 more on that road. I let her tell me rent was late because she had to pay for her Sky bill, something I didn't have. In fact, I still don't. I let her only give me partial deposit because her job was being a nuisance at the time. At least that's the excuse she told me. I even sent her a food basket around £60 during the pandemic, mainly because I didn't want her kids to struggle because I was aware of her financial problems. And I also put them up in apartments whenever we had to do work over the winter because I was always conscious that children, who weren't little by the way, were living there. And I never want a tenant living somewhere that I wouldn't live myself. So I genuinely feel I tried my best. But the fact that she turned this property into a trap house with daily parties, her brother moving in post his prison sentence, with pets that absolutely ruined the place and just turned it into a disgusting hangout spot, which I'm going to share in a few moments, it still baffles me till today. And it does make me question people's thoughts on how they can play a victim 24/7 and it's the world's fault, but they're oblivious to their own actions. Anyway, I digress. Let's break down the cost. So I've just rummaged through my bank account outgoings, reliving some past trauma to try and give you guys the most up-to-date data. So here it goes. So initially I spent around £35 with Rocket Lawyer trying to get some advice, as I was initially hoping to do the eviction thing myself. I thought let's just try and keep the cost down. Didn't work like that. And as a consequence, I actually chose the eviction service route. I spent £75 for an eviction specialist, to prepare and serve the cover letter with Section 8 and Section 21. Now they do this themselves and they make sure all the right stuff is sent. Because if you don't serve notice the right way, you're basically going to shaft yourself. Now after doing this, the next step was to proceed with a money order, which remains for around 6 years. Now at this point, I had sent £1,290 to them to proceed and handle it until I got possession of my house. Now at this stage, I was just, well, sitting there and waiting. But on the 27th of July, 2023, the district judge gave me order for possession during the court hearing, which of course the tenant failed to show up for. Now in terms of the court order, I was granted possession before or on the 10th of August. I was owed £4,550 for rent arrears and £21.36 per day from the 7th of August. There was also £355 worth of costs she was asked to pay, totaling £4,905. Now at this stage, I was around £6,305 out of pocket. Obviously, there was the mortgage issue too, which up until that time cost me around £1,750. So I was around £8,000 down. But the bigger problems occurred when I actually got possession of the house. And it wasn't pretty. And even then, she ran off with the keys. So initially, I had to start by sending someone out to get all the locks and doors changed, which is something I advise anyway. And that came in at around £150. Now, upon entering the house, I became more and more convinced that this person was a demon. Guys, you probably can tell from many of my videos that one of my nostrils rarely works and I regularly have colds, so my sense of smell isn't great. But boy, that didn't stop me from smelling the stench from this house. It was almost like a horror movie. We opened the door and there were flies everywhere, and genuinely, I thought someone was dead in there. Not that I smelled a dead person, but my gut was saying something was dead in this house. Now initially, I just wanted to leave, and honestly, I contemplated just getting some cleaners in there, getting everything out and just selling the property. I was a little distraught, and I know some tenants will watch this and be like, oh, let's get the violins out. But I came up poor as shit. And I worked since the age of 15 and I put my life savings into that property, which was vacant at the time. It wasn't looked after, and I believe I turned it into a beautiful home. And so to see how it was treated, it just made me feel really sad. But thankfully, the wife was a little less emotional at that time and she got on the to-do list. And we managed to clear it out with the help of a friend, Hannah, who has a cleaning company. Amazing service, by the way. And they managed to do the whole job for £1,200. Not only did they have to clean it, they had to rip out all the carpets as well, which were destroyed by elephant footprints, it looked like, and also from cigarettes, because ashtrays evidently weren't a thing. And who needs them when you got new carpets you can take your fags out on? Then there was this funky thing hanging from the ceiling, which I'll just show you in this image here, which again, I had no idea why it was there, but sadly, it was. Now, one of the cool features of this property is that it had a little basement, like a sort of man cave. But when the cleaner met us on the final day after clearing it out, the things she found in there made me bring up a little vomit. They had a fridge down there which had raw, out-of-date meat in there for months. Savages. But if that wasn't enough having out-of-date meat stenching up the place, it was also used as a sex room. Guys, I'm talking condoms, sex toys, and well, all the things a horny teenager would search for on the internet at night. They were all present. Now, bearing in mind it's a mother and her 2 kids, it sounds a little rank. However, cut a long story short, there was so much more shit like drains blocked, writing Pharaoh on the walls for no reason whatsoever, blocking the sinks. It was just disgusting. And personally, I don't know how people live like that, but hey, each to their own. Now, thankfully, the renovation of this was done by a good friend of mine, and he managed to do it on an amazing budget. But I was so out of pocket that I just wanted someone I could trust and to just try and bring the cost down a little bit. And thankfully, he managed to do everything for under £4,500. And then, of course, there was the carpets, which cost £1,600 with underlay. Adding some bills for the 3 or 4 months, which came in at around £300. We were left with quite a big bill. So pre-eviction, you're looking at around £8,000. But then once we got the possession back, we had £150 for the keys and locks, £1,200 for the cleaning, £4,500 to my friend, £1,600 total on the mortgage, £500 for bills and council tax or there or thereabouts, £1,500 for 6 more months of mortgage. So we were looking at around £17,450. Now bear in mind, this property when rented doesn't make 25% of that after all costs. So it's like 4 years profit pre-tax. So it only takes one bad egg to really destroy your property portfolio or your cash flow. And I really want to highlight that this can happen to many of you out there. So it's not all sunshine and rainbows. And these truths need to be known before you ever consider becoming a landlord, because friends, it's not all as great as what you see on social media. Any questions you have, please drop them below. And thank you for watching, my friends.